One, we had a good Q&A session yesterday, I thought, especially since we hadn't had a hearing in the Senate side on this bill. So I know we had a lot of questions on our side so we could understand, get our arms around this. And I still have a couple questions with regard to the reimbursement rate, because I think there was some discussion that, in fact, in section 2, it talks about the reimbursement for the cost of replacing a functional drone, but I could not find the language with regard to any kind of depreciation of a drone that maybe still has some life in it. And I think we're talking about maybe offering an amendment or conceptual amendment on this to allow the Attorney General to negotiate the depreciated cost versus the full replacement cost up to basically. If you could get that language more correct, I don't know if you have that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so we had some help drafting this bill, and we didn't. The bill currently doesn't have trigger for depreciation in it, but we did discuss that throughout the process, and we agree that you need to leave room for negotiation for the Attorney General, so that if you have a 5-year-old drone with a 5-year shelf life or 7-year shelf life, it's not completely replaceable, and so you should allow for some depreciation, but there's still an actual cash value to the drone. So we would want to make sure that they're at least getting actual cash value for their depreciated asset, so that if it's a 5-year term and a 5-year shelf life, they don't just get zero, because there's still an actual cash value to the drone.
Right. I don't know if Kyle, if we need to make a conceptual amendment to allow for the AG to make that kind of negotiation. If you've got some wording, or we could potentially throw that in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's completely your prerogative. Ultimately, the only thing this conference committee is bound by is the report that you signed at the end. So if you wish, I can iron out the details of that language, and then if and when signatures are collected, you would review it to make sure it reflects your intent.
I think that would be good, because I think that what we heard yesterday, that there was going to be a delta between, the full cost versus some reduced cost, the life of the drone, and I couldn't find it in the bill. So maybe if we could make that clear, I think I'd feel a lot better about that. And then I think I had one other question with regard, I think it was on page 2, line 4, with regard to the disposal. Do we, and this is probably a Kyle question, I'm guessing. I thought it was line 4.
Mr. Chair, I'm seeing it at the bottom of page 2.
That's it, on line 34, 30, yes. With regard to disposal, are we allowing the agencies to come up with the disposal process? Who determines what the proper disposal is? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the case that a governmental agency does not receive reimbursement for a replacement drone, they could dispose of it, but they would be bound to what they're authorized to do by their governing body. So it's that governing body that would essentially dictate how they dispose of that drone, whether it's destruction or selling it, a trade-in, et cetera. And that's on line 41.
We're not working on 172 right now. We're working on 271, yes. So the other question, I guess, in that, so we would sell a drone for private use, something we couldn't use, but a private company could. I wonder if that's a good idea. I don't know if there's, or trade, I could see a trade-in perhaps, but I don't know if you guys would allow, any thoughts on that?
So I think the way the bill is currently worded, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but the law enforcement agency that is surrendering their drone, if they don't get reimbursement from us when they buy their new one, they have the right to dispose of it themselves, at however their local authority says they can. If we do reimburse them, then we take ownership of the drone. And the only time it would ever be disposed of by the local government is if we didn't hold true to what we're saying we'll do. And these drones are currently being sold to the public outside of the law enforcement agency anyway.
Okay. I was worried about the potential selling of a drone that we may be concerned about security risks and give it to a private entity that say, hey, we got a drone that's got this capabilities on there. But I can see that, that for them to get a reimbursement, that they could do that. Any other questions, committee? Senator Cluse or? Yeah. Or Senator Faustido? Okay. I think that's all that I had. And then I think there is an amendment that we want to talk about.
Yes, Kyle, do you have you hand out the amendment?
I'll explain
Yeah,
it.
you want to go ahead and explain it or take a stab at it?
I can get us started, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would take a portion of Senate Bill, I believe it's 3037, and insert it into a 271. And so it would state that no state agency shall enter into a contract or agreement to procure final or finished goods or services from a foreign principal. And then it has similar exception language that we've seen in other bills where it says a governmental agency may enter into a contract or agreement to procure final or finished goods or services from a foreign principal if such foreign principal has essentially been evaluated by CFIUS and there's no recognizable security threat, or they've entered into a national security agreement with CFIUS or the Department of Defense. And this provision would not apply to any contract or agreement entered into prior to July 1, 2024. One quick, I guess, conceptual amendment to the amendment is that when I added this language, I just replaced references to state agency to governmental agency by mistake, but the intent is that this provision would only apply to state level entities, not the more local units of government. But if you want any additional detail about that underlying bill that this came from, I would defer to other members of the committee or stakeholders.
Seems pretty straightforward, even with the conceptual, I think.
So the purpose of this was, it was in another bill, but it fit better in this because of the two subject rule, or the single subject rule. So we had to make a change and move it into here to make more sense.
Senator Cluse, what did you want to repeat?
Can you repeat that last part where you're talking about the state versus local?
The underlying drone bill 271, it applies to governmental agencies. And so that means state agencies all the way down to county, township, et cetera, local governments. But this portion, this section from the other Senate bill is meant to only apply to state government, not local government.
Do you have a question, Senator Faustido?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So here on where it's struck on line 26, and then that parentheses 1. So explain that. So produced in any country of concern. So you're saying that if it's only related to the government, the state entity, then it can be produced in any country?
It restricts, basically, as I understand it, and Kyle, you can correct me, is restricts the governmental agency from purchasing, acquiring, or otherwise using any drone, the critical components of which were produced in any country of concern, which would be that list of Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, China, including Hong Kong, Venezuela. I'm leaving one out in there. Anyhow, those countries of concern. So in other words, if the drone or the parts, well, it means that the government cannot buy the drone or the drone parts from those countries of concern because of the security risk. So you could.
So that's covered in the underlying bill. This amendment is for contracts.
Correct, on contract,
Okay.
yeah. Any questions? Good with that? I think we're good with that. I believe we're fine with that. So we're back on, so we'll add that to the bill, or add that to the conference committee report. I think I have another amendment I wanted to discuss and bring up and see what our compadres on the House think about this one. This is something from Utah we just got, so see what you think. We can discuss.
Okay.
I'll have Kyle explain this one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So turning to the back page, this would insert a new section that states that any governmental agency operating a drone that is restricted by the provisions of Section 1A, so the types of drones we're talking about from countries of concern, the government agency who's operating the drone, shall isolate all network communications to and from such drone and associated connected devices from the internal network communication of such governmental agency. Any media generated by the critical components of such drone during operations, including but not limited to flight logs, photos, and videos, shall not be stored on cloud storage offered or maintained by the manufacturer of such drone or critical components thereof.
So it basically firewalls off our state agency networks from any potential crosstalk between those drones while they're still in use. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just generally, because this is new language I haven't seen, have we had any conversations with, because this doesn't just apply to state agencies, this goes down to every governmental agency.
Right.
So have we had any conversations about whether this is something like local police departments, fire departments, cities, townships, anybody who might use a drone, that they have the capability to do in terms of creating a separate network connection and creating a server space that is separate from the rest of their normal IT functions?
Have not had that conversation. Have not had that conversation. Obviously, you know, we're worried about the security risk of the drones and the operation of the drones that we already have. And I don't know if perhaps this was just an idea that we had to try to help further secure our local agency, and in particular law enforcement guys, the networks and the cloud storage from that, just to protect them.
Yeah.
Because if we're aware of the risk, then maybe we ought to, and if you guys would like to discuss, we can recess for a few minutes and let you guys talk it over.
I mean,
Would you prefer to do that?
philosophically, I don't have a terrible objection to this, but I do think that we're about to add something, well, one, that we don't know what the on-the-ground effect will be. And two, I guess I would argue that the underlying bill ultimately says you can't use these drones. So this feels like, I guess this would be relevant until all the drones are replaced with domestic products. But after that point, this is a concern we don't have.
Okay.
I'm somewhat familiar with this language. I've seen it before, and at first glance, I think it's a good thing. I just want to make sure that we're not limiting the use, the functionality of the drone itself. Can you give us
15 minutes, 10
10
minutes?
minutes to discuss it, and
Yeah.
we'll come back?
Now, let's do that. Let's,
Just want to make sure if we're going to put this in there, just want to make sure we're not neutering the functionality of the drones.
yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
Before we recess,
So while the drone is actually being used, you have communication. So what keeps that data and that information while in use?
oh, well, there's talk between the controller by the law enforcement agency in an attempt to, if there is some kind of a hacking or some kind of transfer of data, that they're not being able to get into the networks of the local agencies or the governmental agencies, and we're not storing it on a cloud server that is operated by one of those countries of concern. So we're trying to just firewall it off so you can use that drone and not have the security concerns.
So if I'm following that right, they can use their own network, whatever network they have during the operation, during the usage.
It's basically, they would have to separate out their normal network from the drone, from connection with the drone, correct? And
That works great. 10 after 4, we'll be back here.
we're in recess till 4:10, and so we can discuss this. Thank you. on the House sub for Senate Bill 271. And I think we've tried to do some checking on this, and we have some concerns that we may not know the full extent of what we're doing with this. And so I think we'll pass over this amendment. The other thing that we discussed yesterday that, we were asking so many questions that this 5-year timeline of allowing our agencies to replace their drones that are in use does give us time to make tweaks of this nature as we find and adjust the bill. So, this bill as it exists today, obviously, will probably evolve over the next year or so. So I think we're fine at this point leaving that out and just going with the amendments that we've made so far. And any discussion on that? Senator Cluse?
Just clear it again. So within that 5-year window, these agencies don't necessarily have to adhere to everything right away.
Kyle, there are a couple other windows in this bill, but just to make sure I'm right, they have 5 years to replace, they can't purchase new drones starting July 1st. They can hold these for up to 5 years. They can maintain them, buy parts for them for 3 years, is that right?
27, I think, right?
Right, 27, right. So there's some language in there that limits the maintenance after a certain amount of time.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I think they can, after July 1st of 27, if they replace any parts, they can't replace any parts from the entity, one of the foreign entities that, from a country of concern in the 5-year timeline. So it does give them time to plan and, of course, for the AG to negotiate the costs and understand what the costs are going to be to the state. Any further discussion, Senator Fasquedo? You're good, okay. And as long as that language for the conceptual amendment, we talked about the AG negotiating that, I think we will want to take a look at that. Maybe what we'll do is we can finalize this tomorrow morning, unless there's any necessity to wait.
I'll certainly keep the chairman and members apprised on the timeline, but it should be achievable for us to get the committee report done and ready to present to you if you want to meet. And then at that time, if you approve of the language, then you could sign it all at once here.
Here's my suggestion. We've got the language on Senate Bill, House sub for Senate Bill 172, the land acquisition bill has just been sent. I'd like for the conference committee to have time to look at that so we can start working on that tomorrow morning. And when we meet tomorrow morning, the first order of business would be to finalize this, to allow Kyle to complete his work on the tweaking language of the AG, and then we can dive right into the Senate Bill, House sub for Senate Bill 172. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Sounds great to us. What time do you want to?
I think what we should do, to give everybody time, why don't we do it upon recess of the second chamber after the morning session? So I know the Senate's in at 10. I'm not sure if the House is in at 10 also. You're in a, oh geez, 6:30.
5:30 in the morning?
5:30 in the morning. No, let's do the 10 o'clock.
Start at Hanover.
So it would be, however long it takes us to get through that. It might be 11 o'clock or something tomorrow morning, something like that. And we'll shoot for this room. I'll confirm that it's this room, but we'll get it set up for tomorrow morning.
Okay, and just to confirm, the goal is to complete both bills at that time.
Certainly, yeah.
Great.
That's going to be the goal.
You want to add that into?
Oh, we won't, I think we'll keep it think we'll discuss that, but I think it might be safer to keep it separate. That would be my thought.
One might have a better chance of survival than the other.
That's,
So we need
that's
to get
what
something done.
that's what I'm thinking. I have two different conference committee reports there so that one survives, the other doesn't, then there you go. So
Yeah.
if that's fine with everybody, thank you